Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series, How to Read Music for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the major scale and major scale keys. First off, if you like all the diagrams for this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, How to Read Music for Guitar. But I am working on it right now as I'm filming this lesson, so it might not be available as you're watching this lesson. If it is available, a link will pop up on the screen that'll allow you to download it. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to download it when it is available. This is part 16 from our series, How to Read Music for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the last lesson, we talked about key signatures, and I explained what was going on, where the key signature landed in the staff, what it did to the notes in that piece of music. But to fully understand key signatures, you have to understand the major scale and major scale keys, because key signatures are representing specific keys coming out of the major scale. And I'm not going to dive too deep into the major scale because I have a whole series on music theory which really dives deep into the major scale. So you can check that out if you want more theory behind this. That's called Music Theory for Guitar. It's just free on YouTube. But it is important to at least touch on this so that you have the basic understanding if you don't understand the major scale already. So any scale is just a combination of intervals. So you start on one spot with one note and you stack intervals on top of that. And the major scale is the most important to understand for Western music because it's the foundation for Western music, and most of what you hear is coming out of the major scale or is related to the major scale in some way when you're talking about Western music. And when you're talking about key signatures, it's saying that that piece of music is in a specific key, and a key is referring to the major scale. So for example, what's on your screen right now is the C major scale. So if something was in the key of C, that would mean all the notes and chords would be coming straight out of this major scale. For example, if you took the C major scale, you could build chords out of it. You get C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, or extensions on those chords or other chord types. But any chord you get is going to come straight from these notes in the major scale. So for example, a C major chord are the notes C, E, G played together, while C, E, G are right out of this major scale, C, E, G. Or D minor, the notes to make up a D minor chord are D, F, A. Of course, you can see that D, F, A are right out of this major scale. Every chord that you build, everything you do would be coming straight out of the notes of the major scale. And then if you were soloing over chords that were from the C major scale, you would use notes from the C major scale. And everything would resolve and revolve around the first note of that major scale. So for example, the first note of the C major scale is C. The first chord is a C major of some sort. If you had a chord progression in the key of C, everything would revolve around this tone right here. It's called the tonic. So that means if you played a chord progression, for example, C, A minor, D minor, G major, that's a common chord progression. Once you got to G major, you go back to C to start over, or if you hit that C major again, it sounds like it's resolved. It sounds like it's finished. This is where everything wants to resolve because it's the tonic. Everything's pulling back to the tonic, which is the key. Or if you were just to play the C major scale as single notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, that'd be a very specific sound. It's the do, re, mi sound. Everyone knows it. If you know Western music at all, it sounds very strong, like it wants to pull back to this C to resolve. If you just stopped on this B, it would sound unfinished. But once you hit that C, it sounds resolved. You can stop there or you could start over. So that's what it means to be in a specific key. And to build a major scale, you just take the formula whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And what that means is you could start on any note. We'll just stick with C for now. So if I started on this C note and I just removed the other notes to just keep it on one string to make it easier to see, and if I applied that formula, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and a whole step is 2 frets apart, a half step is 1 fret apart, those would be the notes you land on. That would be a C major scale. So a C major scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, and then back to C. And the C is your root or your tonic. And it wouldn't matter what note I started on. I could start on any note, apply that formula. I'm going to have a major scale, and whatever note I start on is the root of that major scale, which means it's the name of the major scale, which means it's the key of the major scale. So if I started on F, if I applied that formula, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, I would end up with these notes, and that would be an F major scale. Anything using these notes, only using these notes to build chords and resolving around that F, is going to be in the key of F. And you can see right here it says A sharp or B flat, which I mentioned before are enharmonic equivalents. They're the same pitch with a different name. The way you know which one it actually is, because you wouldn't call it by both names, is that the major scale always goes in alphabetical order according to the musical alphabet, which the musical alphabet is just the alphabet from A to G, and it starts over at A. So we have F, G, so after G it starts over at A. A, you couldn't go to A sharp because that'd be two A's in a row. You'd have to go to B because we need some sort of B, so it'd be B flat, C, D, E, back to F. So just remember that to know if it's a sharp or a flat, which one to call it, it has to go in alphabetical order. You're not going to repeat two of the same note names. And then if we build just one more scale to really lock this in, I'll just take the note of A. If I build a major scale starting on A with the formula whole step, half step, whole step, half step, I would end up with these notes. That's the A major scale. Again, the way you figure out whether these are sharps or flats is that it has to go in alphabetical order. So we have A, B, that means we need some sort of C, so that means it's C sharp, D, E. We need some sort of F, that means it's F sharp. We need some sort of G, that means it's G sharp, and then back to A. And if you use a sharp, for example, this first one's C sharp, you automatically know the rest are sharps as well, because it wouldn't be C sharp and then G flat, for example. They'll all be sharps. So the notes in the A major scale are A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And if we were to look at that written out in musical notation, it would look like this. Here's your A, here's your B. This is a C note right there. It has a sharp in front of it, so it's a C sharp. D, E. This is an F note with a sharp in front of it, so it's F sharp. G has a sharp in front of it, so it's G sharp, and back to A, which is an octave higher. You would never see it written like this with a mix of sharps and flats. And you would never see it written where you go from an A to a B up to a D, which this is right here. You need a C. And it needs to fill every line in space. You can see that right here we're skipping this space, so that you know that's not right. It has to fill every line in space to make a nice straight line up, which will look like this. You can see this creates a nice line up. This one is jogging up like this, so that doesn't work. And then if we go back and we just build an F major scale again, same way we did, we end up with these notes. If we were to write that out on a staff with no key signature, it would look like this, because we have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, back to F. That's how you'd write it with no key signature. But since we know this is in the key of F, it's an F major scale, so it's in the key of F, we could use the F major key signature, which looks like this. So now instead of writing the B flat in front of every B that we come across, we put it in the key signature here, which is down here, and if there was a time signature, it'd be between that clef and the time signature, but it just doesn't show the time signature here. So now we know that every B we come across, no matter what octave it's in, no matter if it's on this line or lower or higher, it's going to be a B flat unless it's otherwise notated. So that's where key signatures are coming from. They're not just random flats or sharps. It's not just a random, oh, I want this piece to have all C sharp, so I'm just going to throw a sharp down here. There's very specific rules, and they all relate to major scale keys, which we're going to talk about more in the next lesson and how it all works. Or if we were to look at the A major scale again with no key signature, it looks like this, where all your C's, F's, and G's are sharped so that you can have it in alphabetical order. Instead of writing sharps in front of all those notes, which if you had a lot of those notes in a piece, that would be really messy, you just write the A major key signature, which looks like this, and now we know that every F, C, and G that we come across, unless otherwise notated, is going to be a sharp. We don't write it in here anymore. So that's where these key signatures are coming from. Like I said, they're not just random groupings of sharps and flats. They're related to the major scale and the keys that come out of the major scale. And in the upcoming lessons, I'm really going to dive into more about this and how to figure that out and the rules behind everything. So that's an explanation of the major scale and major scale keys. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about the circle of fifths, which relates to everything we've been talking about. And be sure to download the eGuide. All the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we had at least one new lesson every day.